Welcome to Reading the Bible Together, our follow-up series to reading the Gospels together. And as promised, we're going to start at the very beginning, Genesis, which in itself means beginning. And the book of Genesis begins in the beginning, and that's the scene. But the subject of the sentence, the chapter, the book, not to mention the whole Bible, comes next. God. In the beginning, God. There isn't anything before God. There's no existence apart from God. In the beginning, God. Everything begins with God, including, we are told, creation itself. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God is not a local deity confined to earth. God and God's creative energy extend to everything and to all that is. As our statement of faith, Living Faith, puts it, there is one true God whom to know is life eternal, whom to serve is joy and peace. God has created all that is. The whole universe testifies to the majesty and power of its maker. And we worship Almighty God, the source of all life. With thanks we acknowledge God's wisdom, power, faithfulness, and love. Now, the remainder of the chapter of Genesis 1 lays out the details of that creation, which brings order from chaos, light from darkness. With ancient insight that rivals current cosmology, we read, "Now the earth was formless and empty, darkness was over the surface of the deep." We're introduced to a dark and watery world, unique among the myths of other ancient cultures, such as the Egyptians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. There are times when the biblical record will overlap with these cultures, but the picture of creation which the Bible paints is unique, not least because of the next phrase, "And the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters." Now, it's tempting for us to turn to the New Testament baptismal image of the Spirit, which descended upon Jesus in the form like a dove. In Christian iconography, the Spirit of God is often represented in this way, as a dove. But in the Genesis passage, the Hebrew word for spirit is not dove, it's ruach, which is actually better translated wind or breath. Two other images for the Spirit, which the New Testament also uses. Just think of the day of Pentecost and the sound like a mighty rushing wind, or the moment in the Gospel of John when Jesus, speaking with Nicodemus, compares the Spirit to the wind, or later in John when Jesus breathes the Spirit upon the disciples. What's important here is that the wind blowing over the waters is not just atmosphere, it's the wind of God, or the breath of God, the Spirit of God, the same breath which is going to breathe life into Adam. Throughout the Bible, it is the creative power of God at work, stirring the waters, bringing life. Creation then proceeds in an orderly fashion. Again, quite different from the stories of surrounding cultures where creation is a chaotic, haphazard, and often accidental affair, often the byproduct between a struggle or a war between rival gods. Here, though, very different. Step by step comes light, sky, the recession of the seas into areas of dry land with resultant vegetation, the skies clearing, the stars now appear, the sun and the moon taking their place in the heavens, very much associated with the stars. Non-vegetative life first erupts in the seas and then moves to the skies. It's tempting to fit this into our understanding of early life on our planet, beginning as aquatic life, moving into reptilian life, the age of the dinosaurs, the survivors of which are the birds. But that is to overlay our understanding upon the biblical picture. Nevertheless, it is afterwards that mammalian life arises, culminating in the creation of, you guessed it, us. Famously, we read, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them." Now, for centuries, scholars and lay people have debated what this might mean. It can't obviously refer to physical resemblance. We're well past thinking of God as the, the big bearded grandfather in the sky. It must refer to another characteristic of God. And the context might give us a clue of what the text means. Next verse says, let's make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and the livestock, the wild animals, over all the creatures that move along the ground. So it may rule over them. A more literal translation would use have dominion over rather than rule. I think Eugene Peterson gets it right for the way in which we used words today when he translates it. Let us make human beings in our image, make them reflecting our nature, so they can be responsible for the fish in the sea, the birds in the air, the cattle, and yes, earth itself, and every animal that moves upon the face of the earth. That the rulership dominion implies responsibility. And responsibility implies intellect, rational thought, freedom of choice, and action. I think it is this combination which sets humanity apart from the other living creatures and what it means to be created in the image of God. Intellect, rational thought, freedom of choice and action, and responsibility as a result. Now, next we hear God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Again, there's that word rule. There's also the word subdue. And the way in which we use the word subdue today carries a very negative context. When we think of somebody being subdued, we think of them being pinned against the ground in a kind of a George Floyd context. So subdue doesn't really work in our understanding. Govern is an interesting alternative. Bring it under control is another, but again, with some difficulty there. But any way you translate it, we want to get the sense that we're being given responsibility for managing this incredible resource. That's going to become more clear in the second chapter as well. That when we're being told to rule and to subdue, we're being told to responsibly manage this incredible resource. Now that, along with be fruitful and multiply, is our first and primary command. So, framing the story of creation within the context of a single 7-day week, the first day, the second day, our own week-to-week life is a reflection and a reminder of the story of creation, which continues as we live our lives in the ongoing cycle of time. We too are called to rest and reflect upon the goodness of creation, our role within it, and our relationship to the God who made us all, and who repeatedly called creation good. Maybe this chapter can be for us a reminder that we need to stop and rest and reflect upon all that God has made and done, and our role within God's creation. And then in gratitude, we give thanks. And maybe it's time to start taking Sabbath rest more seriously. Order from chaos, light from darkness, a planet spinning around a sun in a solar system that's whizzing around a galaxy and a local group of galaxies and a universe billions of light years across that all began from nothing, all created by God, and all of it good. All in this first chapter. All in a chapter that answers the who, God, the what, heavens and the earth, the when, the beginning, and the where, right here, of our existence and the existence of all things. As for the why, well, we've got who, what, when, where, but for why, we're going to have to wait till chapter 2. And for that, we'll see you next time.